We three know what we're about. And everyone who assisted us performed there. Best, 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 best. For decades, rock fans have blamed Phil Collins for one of the most humiliating Led Zeppelin live performances. History. The story was rather basic. Phil Collins was far from ready. He spoiled Led Zeppelin's comeback at Live Aid. And before more than a billion viewers, he became the guy everyone blamed. You see, I only came here to play the drums and I had a great time. But what if it's not what? Really? Continue? What if Phil Collins was not the cause? Led Zeppelin flop? Picture the disaster already underway. Long before he ever got on stage? For behind the headlines there was a band that little practiced, technical problems that no one could fix, two drummers fighting for their lives, sync, and tension so bad that some of the folks involved still won't talk about that today. So I asked to Robert, can I play? This was a while ago. And then yeah, and I want you to play with them. So was Phil Collins really bad? Of Live Aid? Or was he just the easiest man to fault? It was that crazy of a situation. Phil Collins was about to take on one of the most stressful gigs you can envision, and there was one big difficulty. His was booked everywhere because my career was moving at full throttle. July 13, 1985. And the whole world was glued to Live. Help! This was no ordinary concert. And it was the largest live music event anyone had seen at that time. And Phil? He was one of the biggest stars on the radio and television and the world. The charts. Switch on the radio. And there was Phil, walk into a film theater, and there he was again. Couldn't get away from that person, no. Anywhere you turned. Bob Geldof, the architect of Live Aid, knew the exact number of stars Phil's power wanted him playing in London at Wembley Stadium. And somehow showing up at JFK too. Same stadium in Philadelphia exactly. Day. That sounds crazy even today. Most of that would be funny for people. 2 continents, 2 great crowds. One musician doing everything. But Phil wasn't thinking small time. He was pouring hit on hit on hit. Hit. And when you're riding that kind of momentum, even the most insane plans might begin to feel possible. So he created a schedule that more like a soundtrack from a major film than reality. First he would do a 22 in London at 12. Then he'd go off stage, leap in a helicopter, speed to Heathrow Airport on the mythical Concorde, the supersonic jet which could fly faster, rocket through the speed of sound, the Atlantic, land in New York, leap into another helo, and speed straight to Philadelphia for yet another performance. Really, that was the plan, and somehow everyone felt it might truly happen. It sounded great on paper. Like some high-stakes spy mission, but a covert one this time. Fancy suits and gadgets, Phil was drumsticks and keyboards. But this is where it got genuine. Dangerous. Philadelphia was more than just another concert stop or a payday. No, no. This was something far grander. Phil wasn't just there to do his job. Own music. He'd signed on to drummer for Led Zeppelin, one of the most legendary rock bands of all time. The pressure was off the charts. Fans wanted magic, memories, and a performance would be talked about. But forever. This was not the kind of situation that You walk in tired, you shrug your shoulders and hope for things click somehow. Any mistake and people will remember it for many years. And why the pressure was so intense you got to watch where Led Zeppelin was in 1985. They were rock royalty, but they were a band also overshadowed by tragedy. Their drummer, John Bonham, was dead. Away 5 years before, and they hadn't have played a decent show since. That's not something a band simply moves on from yesterday night. It's a different chemistry. The confidence suffers a blow. The rhythm feels varied. Even with all their legendary stature, there was this huge question hanging in the environment. Could Led Zeppelin actually come back and still be Led Zeppelin? The stakes were sky high and everyone knew that. And Led Zeppelin was not precisely getting on that stage at full strength. There was a lot on the band's shoulders already. Guitarist them Jimmy Page was struggling with some personal challenges at the time, introducing additional uncertainty in a scenario that is already precarious. Phil Collins hadn't even arrived yet. The whole arrangement seemed frail, as if one little problem could send all sideways. Meanwhile, Phil is totally killing it in London. He rips through, sings In the Air Tonight against belts all odds and even shares the stage with Sting. The crowd hangs on every second. Large cheers, big smiles, non-stop energy. It's like Phil can't do no incorrect. As soon as he's done his set, he's from out of there in a flash, running toward a helicopter as though he is in his own action film. Then comes the flying of the Concorde. And that's when the reel begins. Interesting. 'Cause if you knew you was about to sit in with one of the most exacting rock bands of their time, you would probably spend all minute of prep. You'd learn the melodies, run through the plans in your head, maybe even drum out the patterns until fingers on the tray table wounded. This was a huge moment. Phil had run unexpectedly on the flight. Become Cher. He did not rehearse frenetically but relaxed and trusted his instincts. Looking back, some fans would later be wonder if that confidence was a error. Then he arrives in the United States, leaps into another chopper, and heads directly to JFK Stadium in Philadelphia. But the second he gets backstage, things has changed. The mood is tense. No one looks calm down. Not a big celebration waiting for him. No happy hellos. No one saying, "Glad you got here." The energy is weighty in Phil. You can feel it right away. He comes up to the Led Zeppelin trailer, waiting for some kind of team soul. Or maybe a fast laugh. A handshake, maybe. Maybe someone saying good to see you. The mood, instead, is ice cold. Jimmy Page is quiet and aloof. Robert Plant is walking up and down looking deep in meditation. John Paul Jones looks like the man trying to keep the whole thing from falling apart, while he feels all around him uncertainty. And Tony Thompson. Tony was no random drummer for the time being. This guy was a superstar in his own okay. He was the powerhouse drummer of Chic, a group best known for its razor-sharp rhythm and incredible groove. Tony played with power, accuracy and assurance. Absolute animal behind the drum kit. More significantly, Led Zeppelin had already spent the previous week rehearsing with him. They knew how he played. He knew the arrangements. He knew exactly where every stop, every break, and every transition was supposed to hit. Then Phil walks in. And suddenly there are two drummers. Limited practice time, and a reunion performance that millions of people are waiting to see. The pressure was getting heavier by the minute, and the cracks were showing some signs. That changed everything, all at once. Not that Phil Collins was stepping into an vacant space to settle down to and settle himself. Nope. He was heading into a trap that had already had Tony Thompson locked up tight with rehearsals over and routines already in the bag. The chemistry was there, and it was already. Phil was coming at the last minute, trying to get himself into it. The pressure now increases to a further level. Phil never rehearsed with Led Zeppelin for a little minute. Not 5 minutes, not a song. Nothing. He wanders in, attempting to gain a sense of the plan and inquire. So, how are we gonna do this? And, according to Phil, Jimmy Page retorts, "We know the tunes." "You do?" Ouchie. That's about as frigid a greeting as you can think. Most people would have immediately felt the vibe was off, but Phil attempts to go with flow. He thinks of himself as a veteran. He's done the big shows. The strategy was easy enough. Watch Tony, be in sync and make it job. Then he checks the set list. Rock and roll. Whole lotta love. Stairway to heaven. And suddenly the challenge is really true. None of these are straightforward songs using simple drum beats. Led Zeppelin's music is like a roller coaster. Continuously. The grooves move, the timing breathes. And above everything hangs the legacy of John Bonham, who played the drums. Style was strong, loose, and exceedingly tough to replicate. Now visualize two drummers trying to yank that off with little time together. Tony had spent a whole week practicing. Phil had just gotten in a few hours ago. That's a recipe for disaster. Then the walk up to the stage. Around 100,000 people packed into JFK Stadium, with an estimated 1.5 billion people around the world are watching. The pressure is insane. Phil is sitting behind his drum kit. And almost right away things begin going sideways. He can hardly hear what's happening. The monitor mix is not good. The crowd is deafening. No clear signs. The loudest sound cutting through the noise. Tony Thompson killing the snare drum. Next to him. They begin with rock and roll and the problems coming fast. Tony sticks to the style he practiced, where Phil attempts to adapt on the fly. But they did not lock together, but their timing keeps crashing. Their drum smacks land just a little apart, making those awkward flams over. And once more. Fans might miss it once or twice. For an entire show. They witnessed. Instead of one great rhythm section, it starts to sound like two different engines pulling different instructions. Jimmy Page keeps looking at Phil. Phil keeps staring at Tony over and over. Tony concentrates on his own portion. Nobody is on the same wavelength. Page had his own troubles that day. His performance reports say, guitar sometimes straight out of tune. The pace of the songs, though, sounded accelerate and decelerate. Out of nowhere. What should have felt like a victorious reunion sometimes Felt more like a quickly thrown together jam session pieced up under impossible conditions. But the biggest clash was between style. John Bonham played with this big, loose and hefty swagger which appeared explosive simultaneously. Except for Phil Collins. His game was accurate, exact and very regulated. That is not a criticism. Phil was one of the greatest drummers in his generation. Although his strengths were made around accuracy and clean execution. But Led Zeppelin often thrived. Tension, unpredictability, rawness. Energy of rocks. Trying to fit those worlds together. During a high-pressure reunion with zero rehearsal was always gonna be tough. It was total mayhem. Putting it in a beautiful outfit and then that it would suddenly play by the regulations. Then, too, there's Stairway to Heaven. The tune everybody had been waiting for. This was meant to be the emotional high moment of the reunion, the moment Led clicked and everything reminded the world why Zeppelin were legendary. Almost from the beginning, instead, the cracks begin to show. The performance seems shaky and unsure. Clearly Robert Plant is feeling the pressure, trying to recreate the soaring vocal that defines Zeppelin's classic. Years of focusing on other material. Finding the same vocal power was not easy job. And with all the world looking on, you feel the tension in the air. Forget. Then the drums come in and then stuff get even more messy. Phil arrives at the wrong time and tries to bounce back with an immediately. Phil not blend easily with Tony Thompson, their positions bump into each other. Now both drummers are stepping on each other's timing, and the song has a hard time getting into a steady groove. But instead of gaining momentum, the performance continues to falter. Onward fighting every step of the way. The manner. Phil allegedly stops at one point, playing all together for a few minutes. He sits there and just has his sticks in hand, looking at Tony and trying to work the safest path out of the mayhem. You can almost see what he's thought. If I keep out of the way, maybe I don't make a bad thing worse. It's an awkward moment, particularly with millions of people looking on. But now and then he has to leap back in. And when he does, the time problems come back within minutes. It starts to seem like a melodic crash in slow motion. The tension is all over the level. John Paul Jones looks totally focused on holding everything together. Robert Plant stares deep ineptitude. Jimmy Page keeps on going strong through, resolved to finish the performance, no matter how erratic it may is close to him. And then it's done. No celebrating, no victorious reunion moment backstage. Thrill. The crowd, naturally, cheers. This is Led Zeppelin, and just seeing the is a historic coming together again moment. Yet musicians, reviewers and longtime fans are left shocked at how rang through the performance. Backstage, it is said, the atmosphere is brutal. Phil attempts to brighten the atmosphere with jokingly stating anything like, "Well, that was fun." It doesn't really work. The strain remains, and everyone seems to know facts did not turn out as expected. Then the criticism. Hard down. Biggest gripe? Two drummers. Many thought it was a mistake by the beginning. Phil had made the race from London to Philadelphia that same day, strolled, becoming one of the most challenging, imaginable performances and, somehow, ended up taking the blame for much of it. And the media is moving fast. What occurred? What was that noise? Do you know who it was? But the public discourse does not. Get caught up in the rushed schedule, the absence of rehearsal, or the technical problems on stage. Phil is the focus instead, with assertions that he just wasn't well equipped for the substance. Fallout is quick to get messy. Phil later pushes back interviews, saying he was invited to participate in the performance. He did not impose himself upon the stage. He goes on to describe the whole as a complete mess, and even suggests that had walking off been a realistic choice, he might have thought about it. And frankly, it tells you everything about how chaotic the situation had to have felt at the time. Phil didn't keep his mouth shut after the show, and the back and forth really killed the bigger row. Before long, the reunion at Live Aid became one of the most prominent cases of rock. Incredible talent coming together with great pressure and very little pressure. Education. It also affected the look of some people. Phil Collins. He was the man who, before Live Aid, was capable of anything, a hitmaker who could leap from pop to rock and do everything looks easy. Later critics remarked this achievement as evidence that even the limits to the most massive stars. Then came one of the clearest signs of how disappointed Led Zeppelin was. The get-together. When later Live Aid performances were published on DVD, the band was said to have decided against including their set. That says a lot. This was historic in itself, but the event was a certain performance was something they didn't want persons, they clearly under review. But history has a long memory. This wasn't some lost club date. It was broadcast live on the world. People saw the mix-up. They were. He could see the tension. They witnessed an incredibly ambitious plan smashes into a brutally hard reality as it happens. One musician sailed an ocean at supersonic speed to pull off the impossible scheduling work, only to end up in one of the most insane moments in rock history. And here's the crazy thing. Phil's career hardly slowed down. He returned to his solo career, selling remained huge millions more records. Popular, and continued to be one of the most known musicians on the planet. But times like this are never quite vanish. Especially for a musician whose identity was formed behind the drum kit long before he was a superstar singer. And it is important. For drumming was not just another skill for Philip. It was in the midst of. As a musician he was. So to be connected to a performance that many thought was a failure certainly hit harder than most realized. Awards, top charting albums and sellout tours aren't automatically delete moments you'd prefer forget. And another surprise in the story. Led Zeppelin joined again in 2007 when, with Jason Bonham, son of original drummer John Bonham, on the kit, everything was different. The show was planned with extreme care, heavily practiced. His supporters gave him high accolades and critics and alike. Another setup, and a very different outcome. And no, that Phil Collins was not on. Chapter 4. So when people look back at that hot day in Philly, they forget about perfection. They recall the sound, the pressure, the weariness. They remember big expectations, encountering technical difficulties, impossible timing, and styles that compete. They recall a weird moment when ambition outstripped preparation. To the whole world watching. But what do you all think? Did Phil Collins get falsely accused of the Live Aid flop? Or did he go on the stage at all without practicing beforehand? Leave me a remark down below. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications to be able to miss the next in the story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.